What happens when a woman who built everything from nothing dares to stand up against one of the most powerful men in America? Imagine this, a black female CEO, sitting in the polished leather cabin of her own jet, reviewing a deal that could take her company global. Across from her, a billionaire whose smile hides a predator's intent. He belittles her, questions her worth, and plots to steal the empire she sacrificed her life to create. And then her hand connects with his face. One slap, sharp and defiant, echoing through the cabin. A private confrontation at 30,000 feet explodes into a battle that shakes the foundations of corporate America. But here's the question. Was it the biggest mistake of her life, or the beginning of her greatest fight? Would you risk everything, your career, your reputation, your safety to expose the truth? Or would you stay silent, knowing the system is stacked against you? This is not just a story about a slap. It's about power, prejudice, betrayal, and the relentless courage to fight back when the world demands your silence. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to our channel because you won't want to miss what happens next. The cabin lights glowed soft gold, the hum of engines steady as the Gulfstream G700 sliced through the thin air at 30,000 feet. Ava Johnson sat tall in her seat, her charcoal gray suit crisp, her hands folded calmly on the mahogany table between her and Richard Sterling. For the last 45 minutes, she had listened as the billionaire CEO outlined terms for what he called a strategic partnership. Each word out of his mouth felt less like an opportunity and more like a trap. Richard Sterling leaned back, swirling the crystal glass of bourbon in his hand as if he owned not just the plane, but the world itself. His silver hair caught the cabin lights, and his smile was the kind that never reached the eyes. He tapped the folder in front of Ava. "These are the updated terms," he said, his tone smooth, rehearsed. "Standard procedure. Nothing you need to overthink." Ava had read enough contracts in her career to know when language was poisoned. Her eyes locked on a clause granting Sterling's corporation full access to SkyShield's proprietary algorithms, the beating heart of the company she had built from scratch. She lifted her gaze, calm, steady. "This is not what we discussed." Richard chuckled, leaning forward as if sharing a secret with a child. "This is how the game is played. You're brilliant, Ava. But brilliance without backing doesn't last. Sign the deal, and you'll have global reach overnight." The hum of the jet suddenly felt louder, pressing into Ava's ears. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of memories her mother working double shifts in South Dallas, whispering to her, "Education is your ticket out, baby." The years of coding alone at 2 a.m, surviving on ramen and sheer willpower. The endless investor meetings where men looked past her to Marcus, as if the black woman in the room could not possibly be the CEO. Every slight, every microaggression, every moment of being underestimated, pressed down on her shoulders in that instant. Richard's smile hardened. He lowered his voice, his words sharp as a blade. "Let's not pretend you got this far on merit alone. You and I both know diversity quotas and media darlings come and go. I'm offering you a lifeline before your little bubble bursts." Ava kept her face still, practiced, unreadable. She reached for the folder again, flipping through pages until her hand froze on a memo she hadn't seen before. It was tucked behind the contract, as if slipped in by accident. But there was nothing accidental about it. Her stomach dropped as she scanned the words in an internal strategy document detailing how Sterling Global planned to acquire SkyShield's patents. Manufacturer crisis. and quietly remove Ava as CEO within 6 months. Her pulse roared in her ears. She looked up at Sterling. His grin widened, and that was all the confirmation she needed. "That's business, sweetheart," he said. "You should be grateful a girl from the South Side made it this far." The world slowed. The air in the cabin thinned, and something inside Ava, something buried under years of forced patience, ignited. Her hand rose before her brain caught up. The crack of her palm against Richard Sterling's cheek shattered the cabin silence like thunder. His head snapped sideways, his glass of bourbon spilling onto the white carpet. The sound echoed. The flight attendant gasped, frozen by the galley door. Marcus Lee, seated across the aisle, half rose to his feet, eyes wide, half horrified, half proud. Richard touched his cheek, disbelief flashing across his face. A thin trickle of blood appeared where his tooth had cut into his lip. Slowly, deliberately, he looked back at her. For 3 heartbeats, the world held still. Then he smiled, not the charming, polished smile he wore for cameras. This was the cold curl of a predator baring teeth. "You'll regret this," he whispered. His voice carried no volume, but it slashed through the quiet like a knife. 2 men in black suits, Sterling's private security, stepped forward from the rear cabin. Their hands hovered close to their jackets, where weapons might be hidden. Marcus moved instantly, his 6'4" frame blocking their path. "Back off," he barked, his voice steady, commanding. The men hesitated, exchanging looks. Ava's hand stung, her palm still burning from the impact. She hadn't planned it. Violence had never been her way. She believed in strategy, in control, in using her mind as the sharpest weapon. But something in Richard's tone, soaked with condescension and casual racism, had triggered a primal response she could no longer contain. She straightened, smoothing the front of her suit with deliberate calm. "This meeting is over," she said, her voice even, steady. "Captain, prepare to land at the nearest airport. Mr. Sterling will arrange his own transportation from there." Richard dabbed at his lip with a monogrammed handkerchief, chuckling darkly. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who I know when I'm finished with you? You'll wish you never learned to read, let alone build a company." Ava leaned forward just enough for her words to land sharp and precise. "You're a terrified old man clinging to a world that's slipping away. Get off my jet. For the first time." Richard's eyes narrowed, not with amusement, but with anger. His composure cracked. His voice dropped lower, colder. "When I'm done, you'll be nothing, less than nothing." The pilot's voice broke the tension over the intercom, beginning descent toward Portland International. Sterling rose, straightened his tie, and signaled his security team before stepping off the plane. He paused at the cabin door, his silhouette framed by the narrow exit. He turned back to Ava, his eyes burning with promise. "You'll regret this," he said again, "and regret won't even begin to cover it." The door shut behind him. The engines roared louder as the jet angled downward, slicing through clouds. Ava collapsed into her seat, her body trembling with adrenaline. She pressed her tingling palm against her thigh, grounding herself. Marcus sat slowly across from her, shaking his head in disbelief. "Holy hell," he whispered. "Ava, you just slapped Richard Sterling." Ava's lips trembled, but her voice came out steady. "He was going to steal everything anyway." She slid the damning memo across the table. Marcus read it quickly, his jaw tightening with each line. "This isn't just business," he muttered. This is war. The cabin felt smaller, suffocating. Outside, the jet pierced through layers of gray cloud, sunlight breaking in slivers. Ava stared out the window, her reflection staring back at her. For the first time in years, she wondered if she had just undone everything her life had been built for, or if she had finally chosen to fight back in a way that could never be ignored. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. Ava Johnson hadn't always known the feel of leather seats on a private jet or the taste of champagne poured before takeoff. Long before SkyShield Technologies became a name in boardrooms, she had learned the language of survival on the cracked sidewalks of South Dallas. Her earliest memories weren't of luxury, but of the buzz of fluorescent lights in the small apartment she shared with her mother. The walls were thin enough to hear arguments from neighbors, the smell of fried food and gasoline mixing with the warm air that drifted through broken windows. It was a neighborhood where police sirens became background music, where opportunity felt like something glimpsed through glass you couldn't touch. Her mother, Lillian Johnson, worked 2 jobs during the week and picked up shifts on weekends. Nursing aide by day, janitor by night. She wore tired eyes and calloused hands, but her voice carried determination. "Education is your ticket out, baby," she would say, pressing a few crumpled bills into Ava's palm for test prep books, even when it meant skipping meals herself. Ava absorbed those words like oxygen. She studied at the kitchen table under a flickering bulb, pushing aside unpaid bills to make room for her notebooks. While friends lost themselves in distractions, Ava buried herself in equations and essays. At night, lying on her thin mattress, she would stare out the window. Planes from Dallas Love Field flew overhead, their blinking lights cutting across the sky. She'd whisper to herself, "One day, I'll be up there, not just flying through it, but owning it." School was where she discovered her strength, though not without resistance. Teachers underestimated her, assuming the quiet black girl from South Dallas wouldn't make it past community college. One counselor suggested she apply to trade school just to be realistic. Ava smiled politely and filed the rejection away in her mind. Another spark for the fire building inside her. By the time she reached high school, Ava was known as the girl who aced every exam but never bragged. She kept her victories private, sharing them only with her mother and with Marcus Lee, the lanky boy she met in freshman year who became her best friend. Marcus shared her hunger for escape. He wanted to be an engineer, and the two of them often sat on the hood of his beat-up car in a parking lot, watching planes land and dreaming out loud. "You think we'll ever get out of here?" Marcus once asked. Ava answered without hesitation, "Not think. No." That certainty carried her to Stanford on a full scholarship. The acceptance letter had made her mother cry for the first time Ava could remember. They celebrated with fried chicken from the corner diner because that's all they could afford. But to Ava, it tasted better than any gourmet meal she'd ever eat later in life. Stanford was both exhilarating and brutal. For the first time, Ava was surrounded by students who had prep schools, tutors, and trust funds. She had nothing but grit. She worked part-time in the campus library to pay for essentials, often falling asleep between the stacks after midnight shifts. When group projects formed, classmates ignored her contributions until she proved, again and again, that her ideas were the ones that solved the hardest problems. In those moments, Ava felt the weight of being both invisible and hypervisible, at once ignored until she had to prove herself, then scrutinized for succeeding. But she refused to let resentment harden her. Instead, she focused on building something that would outlast every dismissal. It was during her sophomore year that the seed for SkyShield was planted. A break-in occurred in a nearby student apartment. The security system had failed, leaving her friend shaken and terrified. Ava began sketching out ideas for a smarter, more affordable security system, one that could adapt to threats in real time, a system that didn't require wealth or privilege to access. She spent nights coding in her dorm room, the glow of her laptop, her only light. She consumed ramen noodles until the salt stung her tongue, surviving on coffee and determination. Marcus, now studying engineering at MIT, became her long-distance collaborator. They traded code, ideas, and encouragement over endless video calls. By the time Ava graduated, she had a working prototype. While her peers lined up for jobs at Silicon Valley giants, she turned down offers with six-figure salaries. Instead, she returned to Dallas, determined to launch her startup from the same neighborhood that had once threatened to trap her. SkyShield Technologies was born in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a second-hand desk. Investors laughed at her pitches. Some ignored her completely. Others offered insulting terms, asking for controlling stakes in exchange for a pittance. More than once, security guards at venture capital offices followed her, assuming she was lost or trespassing. She kept going. 7 years of 80-hour weeks, sleepless nights, and rejection shaped her into steel. Slowly, she built a small team who believed in her vision to democratize high-level security technology, making it available to families and businesses who couldn't afford traditional systems. Then came the breakthrough. A pilot program in Dallas neighborhoods with high crime rates showed that SkyShield's AI-driven system reduced break-ins by nearly 50%. Word spread, contracts followed. By the time Ava turned 35, SkyShield was valued at over $200 million, with offices in 3 cities. When Forbes ran a cover story calling her a rare success story in tech, she knew exactly what that coded language meant. It wasn't just about success. It was about the audacity of a black woman daring to penetrate the white, male-dominated fortress of technology entrepreneurship. But Ava didn't let that label define her. She kept her focus on building, on protecting communities that others ignored. And when she finally stepped onto her very own jet, a Gulfstream G700 sleek and gleaming, she thought of those nights staring out of her bedroom window in South Dallas, watching the sky and whispering promises to herself. This wasn't just a plane. It was proof. Proof that she had lifted herself and her mother out of the ground they had been buried in. Proof that she could carve a space in the skies that once seemed unreachable. Yet, even as she celebrated her first flights, champagne in hand, Ava felt something unsettled in her chest. Success had brought altitude, but altitude also brought turbulence. At 30,000 feet, there's little room to breathe, and even less room for mistakes. Sometimes, when she looked down at the world through the oval windows, she thought about how fragile it all felt, how quickly a storm could turn smooth air into chaos. And deep inside, a voice whispered a truth she didn't want to admit. You've climbed so high, but storms always find you, and when they do, the fall is fast. The first time Ava Johnson signed a lease for SkyShield's real office space, she could hardly believe the ink drying on the paper was hers. It wasn't much, just a third-floor suite above a struggling print shop in downtown Dallas, but the creaky floors and humming fluorescent lights felt like a cathedral. She walked through the space barefoot that night, her heels dangling from her hand, imagining what it could become. "This is it," she whispered aloud, her voice bouncing off the empty walls. "This is where we'll take off." Her mother had cried when she told her, though Lillian tried to disguise the tears as pride. "You're really doing it, baby," she said over the phone. Just don't forget to eat." Ava laughed, promising she wouldn't, even though she knew ramen and vending machine coffee would still be her diet for months to come. Marcus joined her within the year, leaving a comfortable engineering job on the East Coast. Friends called him crazy, but he shrugged. "If I'm going to lose my mind building something, I'd rather build it with you." Those early days were a blur of whiteboards filled with equations, wires snaking across the office floor, and endless takeout boxes stacked in the corner. The air was heavy with sweat and hope. They worked like people possessed, driven by the vision that SkyShield wasn't just another startup, but a revolution security tech that didn't discriminate by zip code or bank account. Investors kept saying no. Doors slammed. Faces turned away. But Ava refused to bow. She gave pitch after pitch, sometimes to empty rooms, sometimes to men who smirked before she finished a sentence. She wore the same navy blazer until the elbows thinned. When she spoke, she put her whole chest into it, painting pictures of safer neighborhoods and families who could sleep without fear. One afternoon, after yet another rejection, she slumped against the office wall. The heat of Texas summer pressed in, sweat soaking through her blouse. "Maybe they're right," she muttered, voice breaking. Marcus knelt beside her. "No, they're not. They don't see it, because they don't want to. But I see it, and you see it. That's enough." That night, they coded until dawn. The glow of their screens was the only light in the darkened building, a quiet declaration of defiance. The breakthrough came with the city pilot program. SkyShield's adaptive sensors slashed break-ins in half across several Dallas neighborhoods within 3 months. Local papers ran cautious headlines, but word spread fast. Community leaders called. Small businesses lined up. Suddenly, people who once dismissed Ava began returning her calls. Funding followed, first in trickles, then in waves. A modest seed round led to a Series A. And soon, SkyShield grew from 2 dreamers to 20 employees, then 50. The little office above the print shop became too small, and they moved into a gleaming glass building with their name on the directory. Ava stood in the lobby the day the sign went up, her heart swelling as she traced the letters with her eyes. SkyShield Technologies, a company born from nothing but grit, belief, and sleepless nights. The press latched on to her story. Black woman from South Dallas builds multi-million-dollar startup. At conferences, journalists crowded her, eager for sound bites. She smiled for cameras, gave polished answers. But inside, she fought the exhaustion of carrying not just her company, but the weight of representation. Every success came with whispers. "She's a diversity hire. She got lucky. Someone else must be pulling the strings." Ava swallowed those barbs the way she had swallowed every insult since childhood. She knew her work spoke louder than any slur, but the constant fight left bruises no one could see. Still, milestones stacked up. By the company's 7th year, SkyShield reached a $200 million valuation. Contracts rolled in from across the country: corporations, hospitals, even schools. Ava's calendar filled with meetings in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. The little girl who once studied under a flickering bulb was now flying coast to coast, shaking hands in boardrooms she once thought belonged to another world. And then she bought the jet. It wasn't vanity, though critics would later insist it was. It was strategy, efficiency, and a small rebellion against years of being told she didn't belong. When she stepped onto the Gulfstream G700 for the first time, she pressed her palm against the polished wood paneling, breathing in the new car scent of leather seats. "This," Marcus said, dropping into one of the plush chairs, "is when we officially make it." Ava laughed, but her smile trembled. She thought of her mother, still living in the same South Dallas apartment despite Ava's offers to move her. Lillian said she was comfortable there, but Ava knew it was pride her mother wanted her daughter to shine, without feeling guilty for leaving her roots. That night, flying above the glittering sprawl of Dallas, Ava sat by the window of her jet, staring at the endless horizon. The engines hummed steady. The stars stretched wide. She thought about the first time she whispered her promise to herself as a child one day. "I'll be up there." And now she was. But altitude carried a strange loneliness. The higher she climbed, the fewer people stood beside her. Even among peers in the tech world, she often found herself isolated. The only black woman in the room, the only voice pushing back when deals ignored communities that needed help most. Sometimes she wondered if the jet was a gift or a trap proof of success. Yes, but also a symbol of distance. Each mile in the air widened the gap between her and the world she came from. At night, she caught herself staring at her reflection in the cabin glass, asking questions she couldn't silence. Am I building a company for the people who need it most? Or am I building it for the people who can afford me? Am I still fighting for South Dallas, or just for the headlines? The doubts never stayed long. There was always too much work, too many deals, too many contracts to chase, but they lingered like turbulence, unsettling even in calm skies. Her mother noticed it before Ava admitted it. "You look tired, baby," Lillian said during a Sunday call. "Don't lose yourself in all that success. Remember why you started." Ava nodded, blinking against tears. She remembered. She always remembered. But memory was heavy when the world pulled her higher every day. The jet became her sanctuary and her prison. She held board meetings mid-flight, coded between cities, even caught fragments of sleep curled against the cabin wall. To outsiders, it was glamour. To Ava, it was survival, the only way to keep pace with the empire she was building. Yet even in her exhaustion, she felt something else hunger. A restless drive that told her this was just the beginning. SkyShield wasn't meant to stay small. It was meant to scale, to protect millions, maybe billions. That ambition made her vulnerable. It was what Richard Sterling saw when he first approached, what he dangled before her like a golden lure. But that moment was still to come. For now. Ava pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the ground drift far below, her reflection gazing back at her with tired eyes. She whispered the words her mother once told her, as if reminding herself education was my ticket out. But courage is my ticket up. And with that, she closed her eyes, the hum of the engines rocking her into a restless sleep, unaware of the storm gathering on her horizon. The first email from Sterling Global arrived on a Monday morning, tucked between a dozen investor updates and 3 unanswered media requests. At first glance, Ava almost skipped it, assuming it was another generic inquiry. But the sender's name made her pause. Richard Sterling. She knew the name. Everyone in the tech world did. Sterling Global was a $30 billion empire with contracts across industries, from government defense to commercial energy. Richard himself was a relic of old money, a 60-year-old magnate with silver hair and a smile made for cameras. He'd been called the Kingmaker, a man whose endorsement could make or break an entire sector. The email was simple. "We should talk. I see potential alignment. R. S." Ava stared at it, her gut tightening. Potential alignment. That was the kind of corporate speak that could mean everything or nothing. She forwarded it to Marcus with a short note. What do you think? His reply came within minutes. Dangerous, but maybe worth hearing out. 2 days later, they sat across from Sterling in the penthouse suite of a Dallas high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, a view that seemed carefully staged to remind visitors of just how small they were in comparison. Sterling stood as they entered, his handshake firm, his cologne sharp. "Miss Johnson," he said, smiling wide. "I've heard remarkable things about SkyShield. It's refreshing to see innovation where we least expect it." The words landed with a sting, though his tone was wrapped in charm. Ava caught the pause after least expected. She smiled politely, taking her seat. For the next hour, Sterling spoke in broad strokes about partnership, expansion, global markets. He painted pictures of SkyShield technology in millions of homes worldwide, scaling faster than Ava ever imagined. He spoke of influence, connections, doors that would open. Together, he concluded, leaning back, we could change the world. On the surface, it sounded like everything she had fought for. But underneath, Ava sensed something else. The way his eyes lingered just a moment too long when she spoke. The way he interrupted mid-sentence to reframe her ideas as if they were his. The way he kept referring to Marcus as the numbers man, even though Marcus was her COO, not her translator. That night, back at the office, Ava slumped into her chair, exhaustion weighing on her. "Something feels off," she told Marcus. He frowned. "I've heard rumors about Sterling. He's known for targeting minority-owned businesses, dangles partnerships, then swallows them whole." Ava rubbed her temples. "Rumors aren't facts." "No," Marcus admitted. "But patterns are. Just be careful." She nodded, though unease lingered like static in the air. The next meeting was on her jet, an idea Richard himself proposed. "Why don't we talk in the air? More private. Fewer distractions," he had said with a smile. Ava hesitated, but agreed. The jet wasn't just transportation. It was her sanctuary, her hard-won space. If he wanted to step into her world, then so be it. When the day arrived, she made sure to arrive early, settling into the leather seat with her laptop open, contract drafts neatly arranged. As the engines hummed to life, sunlight streamed through the oval windows, glinting off the polished table. Richard boarded with his 2 security men in tow. He glanced around the cabin and smirked. "Quite cozy for a startup," he remarked, emphasizing the last word as if it were an insult wrapped in politeness. Ava bit back her irritation. "Cozy works just fine." The meeting began smoothly enough. Numbers, projections, legal language. But slowly, Ava noticed subtle shifts. Clauses that hadn't been discussed appeared in the contract draft Richard slid across the table. Terms granting Sterling Global unprecedented access to SkyShield's core algorithms. Provisions that could strip her control under certain conditions. "These terms are different from what we discussed," she said, her voice calm but firm. Richard waved a hand dismissively. "Standard legal language. Nothing to worry your pretty head about." Marcus stiffened beside her, but Ava's expression stayed neutral. She closed the folder gently. "Our legal team will need to review these changes." That was the moment his smile disappeared. Richard leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Listen, Ava, let's not play games. We both know you didn't get here on your own merit. Diversity initiatives, press darlings, those things come and go. Without someone like me, your little empire collapses." The words sliced through the cabin. Ava felt a heat rise in her chest, a familiar storm building. She had endured years of microaggressions, of being underestimated, of being spoken over in rooms she built herself. But something about this moment, the dismissive tone, the entitlement in his voice, the utter certainty that he could erase her struck deeper. She reached for the folder again and found something she hadn't seen before. A memo, tucked behind the contract. Outlining Sterling Global's true intentions: acquire SkyShield patents, manufacture a crisis, remove Ava as CEO within 6 months. Her stomach dropped. Her worst fears, printed in black and white. She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting his eyes. What is this? Richard didn't even flinch. He smiled, thin and cruel. That's business, sweetheart. You should be grateful a girl from South Dallas made it this far. The cabin air felt thin. Time slowed. Ava's palm connected with his cheek before she fully realized she had moved. The sound cracked through the silence, sharp and final. His head snapped sideways, blood trickling from his lip. Marcus rose halfway out of his seat. The flight attendant froze by the galley. Richard touched his cheek, then laughed softly, dangerously. You'll regret this, he whispered. The cabin had never felt smaller. By the time the jet descended toward Portland, Ava's mind churned with fear, rage, and a clarity she couldn't shake. She had drawn a line she could never erase. Richard Sterling wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator, and predators didn't forgive. As the wheels touched down, Ava pressed her palm to her thigh, grounding herself. The sting still lingered. She wasn't sure if it was the burn of fear or the spark of defiance. Either way, she knew one truth: the turbulence had only just begun. The moment the jet's wheels kissed the Portland runway, Ava Johnson knew her world had changed. She hadn't planned the slap. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't calculation. It was 20 years of swallowed insults compressed into a single sound that echoed across the cabin walls. Now, as passengers and crew shuffled to disembark, Ava sat perfectly still in her leather seat, her palms still stinging. Marcus glanced at her, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with both admiration and dread. You just slapped Richard Sterling, he muttered, half under his breath. Ava pressed her lips together. He was going to steal everything anyway, she whispered back. She pulled the memo from her folder and handed it to Marcus. Here, read this. His eyes scanned the pages, his face darkening with each line. This is a full takeover plan. Manufacture a crisis. Tank our valuation. Force a sale. They even outline a timeline for pushing you out. Exactly, Ava said. Her voice was calm, but inside, her chest tightened like a vice. She had proof of his predatory scheme, but proof wasn't always enough, especially against men like Richard Sterling. When the jet door opened, Richard descended first. He dabbed his split lip with a monogrammed handkerchief, his demeanor cool and composed, as though nothing had happened. His security men followed, silent shadows in tailored suits. At the cabin door, he paused, turned back, and gave Ava a thin smile. You'll regret this, he said softly. Then he stepped onto the tarmac, his presence leaving the cabin colder than before. Ava exhaled shakily, her body finally giving in to the tremors she had suppressed. She sank back into her seat, pressing both hands to her face. What have I done? Marcus sat down across from her. You stood up to him. That's what you've done. He thinks he can own you. Own SkyShield. You showed him you're not afraid. Her laugh was hollow. I slapped the most powerful man in the industry. Marcus, you know what comes next. He's not going to let this go. Marcus leaned forward. Then we fight back. Starting with this memo. We need an emergency board meeting tonight, and our legal team. By the time the jet rolled to a stop at the hangar, Ava had pulled herself together. Her spine was straight, her face composed, her voice steady. She would not give Richard Sterling the satisfaction of seeing her break, but she underestimated how fast his reach extended. News of the incident leaked before she even reached her hotel. A vague tweet from a so-called insider big confrontation between Ava Johnson and Richard Sterling today. Sources say it got physical. Within hours, business blogs picked it up, embellishing details without evidence. By the time evening fell, hashtags had begun to trend. #Slapgate, #Unstable CEO. At midnight, Ava sat in a conference room surrounded by her top executives and legal counsel. The atmosphere was tense, electric with fear. Her chief counsel, Amara Coleman, spread out documents on the table. "Assault charges are possible," Amara said carefully. "But more concerning is what Sterling can do with his media connections. He owns stakes in 3 major news networks, dozens of online outlets. He controls the narrative." Ava shoved the memo across the table. "This is his plan. He was going to do it anyway. Now we have evidence." Amara read quickly, her brow furrowing. "This helps us understand motive. Yes, but it doesn't justify physical assault in legal terms. And it's his word against yours regarding any racist remarks." "What about the jet security cameras?" Marcus asked. A silence fell. Amara shook her head. "The system malfunctioned during your meeting. No footage was recorded." "That's impossible," Ava said, her voice sharp. "Our systems are designed to back up automatically." "Not if someone tampered with them," Amara replied grimly. "Someone with resources and inside access." The weight of it sank in. Sterling hadn't just anticipated resistance. He had prepared for it. By morning, the coordinated attack began in full force. Ava's phone buzzed endlessly with notifications. Headlines screamed across business media: black female CEO, attacks industry veteran in drunken rage. Articles quoted unnamed witnesses claiming Ava had been drinking heavily, that she hurled racial slurs at Sterling before striking him. None of it was true, but truth had never been the point. Financial networks ran segments questioning her mental stability, looping her college photos for B-roll. One paper dug up an old costume party picture, stripping it of context to suggest bias. The story inverted reality, transforming her into both aggressor and bigot. SkyShield stock plummeted 32% before the markets officially opened. Investors called in a panic. Clients demanded explanations. By noon, 3 contracts had been suspended, pending leadership resolution. In her hotel suite, Ava stood by the window, staring at the city skyline blurred by rain. Behind her, Marcus paced, his phone buzzing with updates. "They were ready for this," he said, "almost like they wanted you to slap him." Ava turned, her eyes red, but her jaw set. "Then we give them what they didn't prepare for. We fight back." But even as she said it, her phone buzzed again. This time, the message was chillingly direct first day down. "It gets worse. You can end this by resigning and selling to Sterling. Otherwise, everything burns. Your choice." Her stomach lurched. She handed the phone to Marcus. "They're using encrypted channels," he said after a quick glance. "Hard to trace, but I'd bet my life it came from Sterling's people." Ava's throat tightened. "He won't stop, will he?" "No," Marcus said softly, "but neither will you." That night, Ava dreamed of falling. She was back in South Dallas, staring up at planes cutting across the night sky. Only this time, the planes weren't symbols of freedom. They were predators circling overhead, engines roaring louder and louder until the ground gave way beneath her feet. She woke in a cold sweat, her phone buzzing again on the nightstand. More headlines, more poison. Her life was unraveling thread by thread. But beneath the dread, a spark flickered. Richard Sterling thought he could bury her with lies. What he didn't realize was that Ava Johnson had been underestimated her entire life, and every time she had clawed her way back into the light. She pressed her palm against the glass of the hotel window, the same palm that had struck him hours before. The sting was gone, but the resolve remained. "War is coming," she whispered to her reflection, "and I'm not afraid. At 5:37 a.m. Ava's phone rattled across the nightstand, vibrating so hard it nearly crashed to the floor. She had barely slept, her mind trapped between fury and dread. So she was awake when the first headline appeared. Black female CEO spirals out of control after assaulting industry titan. She blinked hard, hoping the words were a hallucination born of exhaustion. But another alert followed, and another. Sources say Ava Johnson drank heavily before slapping Sterling. Leadership in crisis can SkyShield survive its erratic founder. Ava's chest constricted. With shaking hands, she opened the first article. There it was, a glossy smear piece, quoting unnamed witnesses claiming she had slurred words, stumbled in the cabin aisle, and shouted obscenities at Richard Sterling. They even alleged she had used a racial slur, an inversion so grotesque it made her stomach churn. "No," she whispered to the empty room. "That's not true. None of this is true." By the time Marcus burst into her hotel suite an hour later, the lies had metastasized. Cable news anchors dissected her supposed instability. Social media was a flood of hashtags. #crazyboss, #slapgate, #unfit to lead. Meme accounts mocked her face mid-speech at old conferences, twisting them into caricatures of rage. "They were ready for this," Marcus said grimly, tossing his phone on the table. "This isn't random gossip. It's coordinated. Sterling's pulling strings." Ava scrolled through her own phone. Her college photos were everywhere, pulled out of dusty archives. A picture of her at a Halloween party wearing a firefighter's hat was reframed as problematic. An image of her dancing with friends was cropped to make it look like she was intoxicated. It was character assassination with surgical precision, and the stock market reacted in kind. SkyShield shares fell 32% before trading was halted. Investors flooded her inbox, demanding explanations. Clients pressed pause on million-dollar contracts. As if on cue, her prepaid phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. "Step down, sell to Sterling, or watch it all burn." Ava handed the phone to Marcus, her hands trembling. "He's behind this." He scanned it, jaw clenched, encrypted, hard to trace. But it came from inside Sterling Global. "I guarantee it." Ava closed her eyes, pressing her palm against her forehead. "How do we fight this, Marcus? They control the narrative. They control the money. They control everything." He crouched down to meet her eyes. "Not everything. They don't control you, and they don't control the truth." But truth had never felt so fragile. By noon, doctored images appeared online. One showed Ava smashing a wine bottle in a restaurant, though the original photo still buried in her camera roll was of her holding sparkling water. Another clip surfaced, a crudely edited audio file in which a voice eerily similar to hers shouted threats. "How are they producing this so quickly?" she asked, pacing the room. Marcus's expression was grim. "Because they planned it. That memo we found. This was always part of it. You just moved their timeline forward." At 3:17 p.m., the next blow landed. SkyShield's head of cybersecurity, a wiry man named Diego, rushed into the suite, his face ashen. "Our servers," he stammered. "They've been breached. Ava's stomach dropped. That's not possible. Our system is designed by you, Diego interrupted, which is why they knew exactly how to bypass it. Someone used your own backdoor protocols. Internal knowledge. They have everything: emails, client data, even your personal messages. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. You mean everything, Diego confirmed, and they're already leaking it. As if to punctuate his words, Marcus's phone buzzed. A news blog had published a selection of Ava's private emails, completely mundane ones about grocery lists, dentist appointments, and late-night strategy notes, but framed them as evidence of her being scattered and unfocused. This isn't just an attack on the company, Amara Coleman said later that evening when she joined them in the suite. It's an attack on you, personally. Sterling wants to dismantle you piece by piece until there's nothing left. Ava sank into the armchair, pressing her palms together. Her thoughts spiraled. Her mother. Would they go after her, too? The thought made her chest ache, as if summoned. Her phone buzzed again. It was Lillian? Her mother? Her voice trembling. Baby. Someone just called me at work, called me horrible names, said you're finished. What's happening? Ava bit her lip hard to stop it from trembling. I'll fix this, Mama. I promise. But when she hung up, tears blurred her vision. She had always fought to keep her mother safe, to shield her from the ugliness of the world. Now Sterling had dragged her into the battlefield. Outside the hotel, a small group of protesters gathered with signs unfit to lead. Fraud. Racist. Cameras flashed as they shouted for Ava to step down. The walls were closing in. That night, Marcus found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at her hands. You okay? He asked gently. She shook her head. What if they're right? What if I can't win this? He crouched beside her. Listen to me. This isn't about winning the way they define it. Sterling wants you to break. He wants you to quit. That's his game. Don't give it to him. Ava swallowed hard. But how do I fight a man who owns the truth? He has the media, the money, the politicians. I'm one woman. Marcus. You're not just one woman, he said, his voice steady. You're Ava Johnson. You built SkyShield from nothing. You've been underestimated every step of the way and every time. You proved them wrong. This is just another battlefield. She stared at him, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Finally, she nodded, but deep inside, doubt gnawed at her. The attacks weren't just professional. They were personal, intimate, invasive. Every secret, every private word was now a weapon. Later that night, scrolling through the devastation of her reputation online, a text arrived. This one wasn't from Sterling's camp. It was from an unknown number, unsigned, but the words made her freeze. You're not the first. He's done this before. Meet me tomorrow. Public library. 10 reference section. Ava's heart pounded. She turned the phone toward Marcus. What if it's a trap, he asked. Or what if it's the first crack in his armor, Ava whispered. She lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling. She knew one thing with absolute certainty: Sterling had underestimated her. He thought she would crumble. But Ava Johnson was not built to crumble. She pressed her palm against the window as the first light broke across the Portland skyline. If he wants a war, she said softly, he's got one. 3 days after the slap that had already shaken the industry, Ava sat alone in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor of SkyShield's Portland office. Outside, employees gathered in clusters, whispering, sneaking glances at the closed doors. Some looked worried. Others looked almost excited, as if waiting for a storm they had always predicted would come. The board had called an emergency meeting. The official agenda read leadership concerns and crisis management. Ava knew what it really meant. They were here to decide her fate. One by one, the 9 board members filed in. Franklin Pierce, the chairman white-haired 70, and a veteran venture capitalist sat at the head of the table. He had once championed Ava, calling her the future of secure technology. Now, his expression was detached, clinical. Anthony Parker sat 2 seats away, newly appointed chief financial officer. He was slick, polished, his tie perfectly knotted. Ava noticed how he avoided her gaze, tapping something quickly into his phone before sliding it face down on the table. "Let's come to order," Franklin began, his voice measured. "Given recent events, we must address the company's precarious position." Ava's jaw clenched. Precarious because Sterling engineered it, she thought, but she kept her face calm. Franklin cleared his throat. "The facts are straightforward. Miss Johnson physically assaulted Richard Sterling during a business meeting. Regardless of provocation, this action has significantly damaged SkyShield's reputation and financial standing. The board must consider whether a leadership adjustment is necessary to stabilize the company." Ava slid a stack of papers across the table. "Before we discuss leadership, I suggest you all read this." The directors glanced down. It was the memo she had found on Sterling's jet, the smoking gun, a detailed plan to acquire SkyShield's patents, force her out as CEO, and rebrand the company under Sterling Global within 6 months. "This is his playbook," Ava said, her voice steady. "He never wanted partnership. He wanted to gut us, manufacture a crisis, devalue our stock, force a fire sale. You think this is coincidence? He's done it before." Victoria Zhang, one of the younger board members, adjusted her glasses. "This could be interpreted as standard acquisition language. Companies discuss contingencies like these all the time," Standard Ava shot back. "There's nothing standard about planning to destroy your own partner's valuation. There's nothing standard about targeting me personally." Anthony Parker cleared his throat. "With respect, Ava, we only have your word for Sterling's alleged comments. The memo doesn't prove racism. It doesn't prove conspiracy. It could simply be an aggressive strategy document." "Are you calling me a liar?" Ava asked quietly. Anthony's lips curved into something almost resembling pity. "I'm saying emotions clearly ran high. Perceptions can be subjective." Before she could respond, Marcus leaned forward, his voice sharp. "So let me get this straight. Sterling waves his hand, smears Ava across every news outlet, tanks our stock by 30% in 2 days, and we're sitting here debating whether she's too emotional. That's exactly what he wanted." "Marcus," Franklin interrupted, raising a hand, "let's keep this professional." "Professional," Marcus snapped. "What's professional about betraying the founder who built this company?" Ava touched his arm lightly, signaling him to stop. The room was thick with tension. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced down. Another major client had just announced termination of their contract, citing instability in leadership. Her chest tightened. Outside the glass walls, she could see employees watching the news on their screens. Franklin exhaled heavily. "We've also received a letter from Sterling's attorneys. They are suing for assault and defamation, seeking $50 million in damages." The room went silent. Ava felt the weight of every eye on her. "That lawsuit," Franklin continued, "combined with investor concerns and client departures, puts us in a dangerous position. For the welfare of the company, we need to consider a temporary leadership change." Ava stood slowly, her voice calm but resolute. I built this company from nothing. I navigated racism, sexism, underfunding, and ridicule. And now, because I wouldn't let a powerful white man steal my life's work, you want to remove me. If I were a white male CEO who pushed back against corporate piracy, would we even be having this conversation? Silence. No one dared answer. Franklin cleared his throat again. We'll take a 15-minute recess before we vote. As the board members filed out, Ava remained standing by the window. Her hands trembled, but her face remained composed. Marcus followed her into her office. She collapsed into her chair, her mask cracking for the first time. They're going to do it, she whispered. They're going to hand Sterling everything. Marcus crouched beside her. Then we expose them, every single one of them. Before she could respond, voices drifted from the hallway. Ava froze, realizing Anthony Parker was speaking in hushed tones to another executive. She stepped closer to the door, her heart pounding. She's playing the race card. Anthony was saying, classic deflection. She's unstable. Sterling warned us. Ava's stomach turned. She backed away silently, bile rising in her throat. She had suspected Anthony wasn't loyal. Now she had confirmation. Back in her office, she told Marcus. His expression hardened. I had him investigated. His resume left out one key detail. He worked for a Sterling subsidiary 5 years ago. Why am I just hearing this now? Ava demanded. The investigator just confirmed it this morning. And there's more. Anthony had dinner with Sterling last night. The betrayal sliced deeper than any headline. Anthony had been Sterling's plant all along. When the board reconvened, Ava sat with new awareness. How many others had divided loyalties? How many had already been compromised? The vote was swift 7-2 in favor of removing her as CEO. Only Marcus and Denise Walker, a quiet, reluctant board member, dissented. This takes effect immediately, Franklin announced. His voice avoided her eyes. Anthony Parker will serve as interim CEO. Anthony straightened his tie, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes gleamed with victory. Security entered the room, a standard protocol for ousted executives. Ava rose, her face composed, her movements deliberate. She collected her folder, her pen, her dignity. Outside the building, reporters swarmed. Miss Johnson, did you make racist remarks before striking Mr. Sterling? Is it true you've had previous violent incidents? Are you seeking rehab for anger management? Ava said nothing. Cameras flashed. Questions battered her from every side. Marcus pushed through the crowd, guiding her into a waiting car. Inside, silence pressed in. She stared out the window at the building she had designed, the company she had birthed, now in the hands of her betrayers. That night, in her apartment, the harassment escalated. Reporters lingered outside. Her email overflowed with hate messages. Anonymous calls flooded her phone. Some threatening violence. Rain lashed against the windows. Ava sat in darkness, her head in her hands. Maybe I should quit, she whispered to Marcus during their nightly call. They're destroying everything. My mother, my reputation, my company. Maybe Sterling wins. No, Marcus said firmly. That's what he wants. You don't give him that. After he hung up, Ava sat in silence. The weight of isolation crushed her chest. For the first time, she doubted not just her fight, but herself. Then the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Denise Walker, the board member who had voted to keep her. Ava hesitated, then opened the door. I shouldn't be here, Denise said quickly, glancing down the hallway. But you need to know something. She handed Ava a folder, her hands trembling. Inside were documents, internal communications, case studies, patterns. He's done this before, Denise whispered. Sterling has targeted minority-owned businesses for 15 years, creates a crisis, drives down value, acquires them at pennies on the dollar. I voted against you today because he threatened my family. But you need to see this. Ava stared at the documents, her pulse racing. For the first time in days, something sparked inside her. Purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing a predator who had destroyed countless entrepreneurs, silencing them because he believed their race made them easy prey. She closed the folder, her jaw tightening. "Thank you," she said. When Denise left, Ava picked up the phone and called Marcus. "Bring your laptop," she told him. Her voice was steel now, not despair. "We're not giving up. We're fighting back." The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days in Portland. Ava sat at her mother's kitchen table, the chipped wooden surface familiar and grounding. She wore an old hoodie from her college days, her hair tied back in a simple knot. Gone were the tailored blazers and silk scarves. Gone was the illusion of control. She had been stripped bare, CEO title revoked, reputation smeared, accounts frozen. "Eat something, baby," Lillian urged, pushing a plate of toast toward her. "You can't fight on an empty stomach." Ava tried to smile, but her appetite had vanished days ago. She wrapped her hands around a chipped coffee mug instead, its warmth the only comfort in the cold storm of her unraveling life. The TV on the counter blared another report about SkyShield's leadership crisis. Anthony Parker appeared on screen, his polished voice reassuring investors that restructuring was underway. He spoke of necessary change and restoring stability. Ava muted it before her blood pressure spiked. Across from her, Marcus hunched over his laptop, dark circles under his eyes. "They're accelerating the asset transfer," he said grimly. "Anthony's already moving proprietary tech into Sterling-controlled servers. By next week, they'll have full access to your AI protocols." "They're stealing SkyShield in broad daylight," Ava said bitterly. "Correction," Marcus muttered. "They're stealing your life's work." Her prepaid phone buzzed. She glanced down another news alert. Sterling's lawyers had filed their promised lawsuit $50 million for assault, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The complaint painted Ava as a violent, unstable executive who had spiraled out of control. More alarming were the interviews. Former SkyShield employees she barely remembered were suddenly giving statements about her erratic temper and paranoid leadership. It was fabrication carefully seeded lies that fed the narrative Sterling had built. Ava set the phone down and pressed her palms to her eyes. "They've won. Marcus, my reputation's gone. The company's gone. My finances are in ruins. My mother's getting harassed at work." What's left to fight for? Marcus closed his laptop sharply. "You. Your voice. The truth. That's what's left. Sterling thinks this is checkmate, but he doesn't know you. He doesn't know how hard you fight when the world thinks you're down." Ava wanted to believe him, but the weight of despair was crushing. That night, as rain pounded against the windows of her childhood bedroom, she stared at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led her here. The slap, the look on Sterling's face, the laughter that followed. She had thought it was a moment of defiance. Now it felt like she had triggered her own destruction. The prepaid phone buzzed again. Ava answered, expecting another threat. "Miss Johnson," a voice said. "Male, older, steady." "This is Harold Freeman. We served together on the Tech Equity Council last year. Do you remember me vaguely?" She did. A retired judge, sharp-minded, known for his integrity. I'm calling because what's happening to you isn't new. He continued. Sterling has done this before. Many times. But you may be the first who can actually stop him. Ava sat up straighter. You've been tracking him for years. He's destroyed 17 companies founded by black entrepreneurs, 9 by Latino founders, 12 by women. Always the same playbook: create crisis, devalue, acquire. But you Freeman paused. You slapped him in front of witnesses. His ego can't stand that. In his arrogance, he's making mistakes. Ava's pulse quickened. So what do I do? Meet me tomorrow, Freeman said. Downtown library. 10A. Reference section. Don't tell anyone else. Bring Marcus if you trust him. When he hung up, Ava stared at the phone. For the first time in days, something stirred inside her. Not hope exactly, but a spark of purpose. The next morning, she dressed in plain clothes, a baseball cap, a faded jacket. She and Marcus slipped into the public library through the side entrance, avoiding the reporters staked outside her apartment. The smell of old books and damp carpet greeted her. In the reference section, Judge Harold Freeman waited, dignified in a bow tie, his 80 years carried with quiet authority. Beside him sat a young woman Ava recognized vaguely, Zoe Taylor, a former SkyShield intern. Zoe's eyes were bright, determined. She opened a laptop as Ava and Marcus sat down. I think I have something you'll want to see. She pulled up screenshots, login timestamps, access trails. I was on Anthony Parker's team before I left. I noticed he was accessing servers outside his clearance level. When I reported it, it told me it was authorized. But after you were removed, I started logging everything secretly. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up files. Anthony downloaded your entire email history at 2:13 a.m., the night of the slap. He also deleted the primary footage from the jet security system. Ava's breath caught. Wait, deleted? You're saying there was footage? Zoe nodded. Yes, but what Anthony didn't know is that your system backed up to a redundant cloud server. He erased the obvious files, but I cloned his pathway. I still have the full video. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the screen. Ava leaned in. There it was, crystal clear footage of the confrontation on the jet. Richard Sterling's words, every racist comment, every explicit threat, and her slap context and all. Ava's eyes blurred with tears she refused to shed. This changes everything. Not if it stays buried, Freeman cautioned. Sterling controls media outlets and has judges in his pocket. He'll bury this faster than you can release it. Then we don't release it through the usual channels, Ava said, her voice hardening. We go unconventional. Freeman nodded slowly, approval in his eyes. Now you're thinking like a survivor, like someone who's been underestimated her whole life. Marcus leaned back, a rare grin flickering. Sterling has no idea what he just unleashed. For the next hour, the four of them huddled around Zoe's laptop, piecing together evidence, emails between Anthony and Sterling stretching back months, detailed strategies to undermine Ava, even payments funneled through offshore accounts. Freeman outlined the broader picture: Sterling's empire built on systematically destroying minority-led startups, leaving a trail of silenced founders bound by airtight NDAs. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore, Freeman said. You're fighting for every one of them. Ava nodded, her resolve crystallizing. She had been stripped of everything: her title, her wealth, her reputation. But here, in the quiet stacks of a public library, she found something Sterling couldn't touch: her fire. They weren't victims anymore. They were a coalition. That night, back at her mother's kitchen table, Ava spread out the documents Denise Walker had given her alongside Zoe's evidence. The rain still fell outside, but for the first time, Ava didn't hear it as despair. She heard it as cleansing, as renewal. "Sterling thinks he's already won," she said softly, almost to herself, "but he has no idea what's coming." Marcus looked up from his laptop, eyes burning with loyalty. "Then let's make sure he finds out." The following days blurred into a rhythm of secrecy and strategy. Ava no longer operated from SkyShield's gleaming headquarters, but from the basements and back rooms of borrowed spaces, quiet coffee shops that stayed open late, empty church halls offered by sympathetic friends, Judge Freeman's study lined with law books that smelled faintly of dust and wisdom. It was here, in Freeman's home, that the first true meeting of Ava's resistance took shape. Around the dining table sat 6 people: Ava, Marcus, Freeman, Zoe, Amara Coleman, the lawyer who had quietly defied Sterling's narrative, and Sophia Rodriguez, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate misconduct. Each had risked something simply by being in that room. Freeman leaned forward, clasping his hands. "This is no longer just about saving SkyShield. It's about exposing a pattern of predation that spanned over a decade. Sterling believes minority-led businesses are easy prey. He thinks their founders lack the resources, the connections, the resilience to fight back." He glanced at Ava. "He underestimated you." Sophia tapped her pen against a notepad. "I've tried to go after him before. Every lead disappeared. Victims settled. Evidence vanished. I was warned off more than once." She fixed her gaze on Ava. "But what you have. That footage. Those emails, it's gold. The kind of evidence that doesn't just tell a story. It cracks it wide open." Amara nodded. "But we need strategy. Sterling has media influence, political connections, and endless funds. If we move too soon, he'll crush it. If we wait too long, he'll finish gutting SkyShield." Zoe's fingers hovered over her laptop keys, her eyes fierce. "Anthony's panicking. I've been monitoring his encrypted communications through the back door I set up. He's accelerating the asset transfer, but he's sloppy. Every time he moves data, I leave a trail he doesn't see. We'll have proof of corporate theft within days." Ava exhaled slowly, absorbing their words. The weight of leadership pressed heavy on her shoulders, but it was no longer the lonely weight of isolation. For the first time since the slap, she wasn't standing alone. Still, the doubts clawed at her. That night, long after the others had left, she found herself pacing Freeman's living room, unable to sit still. Marcus approached, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "You're doing it again," he said gently. Carrying it all yourself, second-guessing every step, wondering if you're about to lead everyone off a cliff." She stopped, staring at him. "Maybe I am. If I push too hard, if I misstep, Sterling won't just ruin me. He'll ruin them too. Freeman's reputation, Zoe's future, Sophia's safety." My mother Marcus stepped closer, his voice steady. "And if you do nothing, he keeps ruining people anyway. He destroys more founders. He makes you the cautionary tale. Don't fight, or you'll end up like Ava Johnson." "Is that what you want? To be his example?" Her throat tightened. She hated that he was right. "No," she whispered. "I want to be the warning shot." The next morning, they reconvened. Zoe projected a digital whiteboard onto Freeman's wall, mapping out their strategy. 3 vulnerabilities in Sterling's empire had emerged first, Freeman said, pointing to one node financial irregularities, offshore accounts, payments to consultants who specialize in manufacturing crises. Follow the money, and we prove intent. Second, Amar added, the pattern of discrimination. 27 cases so far, all showing minority-owned companies targeted using nearly identical tactics. That's not opportunism, it's systemic bias. And third, Sophia said, her pen tapping again, whistleblowers. I've got 2 Sterling executives willing to talk anonymously, but if we can get one to go public, it changes the game. Ava studied the board. We don't need to destroy him with one blow. We just need enough cracks to make the whole structure unstable. Public doubt, investor panic, regulatory attention. Once the tide turns, he won't be able to hold it back. Zoe grinned faintly. And the footage from the jet. That's the dagger. We hold it until the right moment. The plan was set in motion. Sophia released her first article, a carefully worded piece questioning the official narrative. It didn't accuse Sterling directly, but it asked why a respected CEO like Ava Johnson would suddenly implode without cause. It hinted at inconsistencies in the story, at the suspicious speed of the smear campaign. The reaction was mixed. Many dismissed it as damage control, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Civil rights groups began tweeting under the hashtag #HashTruthBehindTheSlap. Industry insiders whispered that Sterling's story didn't quite add up. Meanwhile, Zoe's monitoring revealed more. Anthony was in constant contact with Sterling, sending updates about Ava's movements, about which executives were wavering, about legal maneuvers. Zoe captured every exchange, archiving them securely in multiple locations. Anthony's nervous, she reported one evening. Sterling's pushing him hard, but he's afraid the truth will leak. He doesn't trust anyone. Good, Ava said. Let paranoia eat him alive. Still, danger loomed at every turn. Late one night, Marcus returned to his apartment to find Anthony waiting with SkyShield's head of security. We know what you're doing, Anthony said coolly. You can still walk away. Tell Ava to step down quietly before people get hurt. Marcus recorded the entire exchange on his phone, his voice calm as he replied, Threats don't scare us, but they'll bury you. The recording joined their growing arsenal of evidence. Every day was a battle. Ava dodging reporters, her mother dealing with harassment, the team working under constant fear of surveillance. Yet through the exhaustion and fear, something fierce grew inside Ava, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. One evening, after hours of planning, she stepped outside Freeman's house into the cool night air. The city lights glittered distantly, blurred by drizzle. Marcus joined her, hands shoved into his pockets. You look different, he said softly. Different how? Like someone who stopped doubting whether she belongs in the fight. Like someone ready to go to war. Ava stared at the horizon, her reflection faint in the wet pavement. For weeks, Sterling had painted her as unstable, irrational, weak. She had almost believed it herself. But standing here, with her allies, with evidence mounting, she felt the truth. She was still Ava Johnson, and she was not finished. War it is, she murmured. Inside, Zoe called out from her laptop. You'll want to see this. They crowded around. On the screen, encrypted messages from Sterling's own headquarters appeared. One of his vice presidents, Diane Mercer, had reached out quietly, offering information. She had grown uneasy watching Sterling destroy lives. She's willing to talk, Zoe said, eyes wide, but only if we can guarantee protection. Ava felt her pulse quicken. This was it, the first real crack in Sterling's fortress. Then we protect her, Ava said firmly. Whatever it takes. The room went silent, every face turning toward her. In that moment, she wasn't just a disgraced CEO fighting for survival. She was something more, a leader, a catalyst, a storm gathering strength in the shadows. Sterling thought he had buried her. Instead, he had planted a seed. And now, it was about to grow into something that would tear down everything he had built. The night Diane Mercer agreed to meet, Ava couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch in Judge Freeman's study, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, each blade clicking softly as though marking time. Every plan, every choice, every betrayal replayed in her mind. She had lost her company, her reputation, nearly her sanity. But tonight, for the first time, she felt the pendulum swing. Diane was no ordinary source. She was a vice president at Sterling Global, someone high enough to have seen the machinery of destruction up close. If she talked, if her documents matched Zoe's digital evidence, it could ignite everything. At 9 the next morning, Diane walked into Freeman's brownstone, her trench coat pulled tight against the drizzle. She looked over her shoulder twice before stepping inside. Her face was pale, lips pressed in a firm line. "You know I shouldn't be here," she said quickly, her voice tight. "Sterling has eyes everywhere. If he finds out—" "He won't," Freeman assured her, gesturing toward the table. "You're safe here." Diane sat, opening her bag with trembling hands. She pulled out a folder, then a flash drive. "I can't stay long, but you need to see this. Internal directives, meeting transcripts. Sterling has been ordering us to target minority-led businesses for years. He keeps files on founders' race, background, perceived weaknesses. He brags about how predictable the collapse will be." Zoe inserted the flash drive into her laptop, her fingers flying. Pages of documents appeared on screen. Spreadsheets, strategy presentations, internal memos. "This is damning," Amara whispered. Sophia was already snapping photos, her journalist's instincts alive. "If even half of this checks out, it's enough to start a firestorm." Diane looked at Ava. "I saw what they did to you, how fast they turned the world against you. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent." Ava met her eyes, seeing the fear there, but also courage. "You're doing the right thing, and I promise we'll protect you." For the first time in weeks, Ava felt the ground shift under Sterling's feet. That night, the team gathered to map their counterstrike. Zoe connected her laptop to a projector, displaying the evidence on Freeman's living room wall. "Here's the plan," Ava began, her voice steady. "We can't just leak this to one outlet. Sterling will smother it. We release it simultaneously, everywhere. Multiple newsrooms, social media blasts, regulatory agencies. Hit him so hard, so fast, he can't contain it." Sophia nodded. "I'll craft the narrative. Not just facts, but the human cost: founders bankrupted, families destroyed. People need to feel this, not just read it," Amara added. "I'll file formal complaints with the SEC, FTC, and EEOC. With this evidence, they'll have no choice but to open investigations. Meanwhile," Marcus said, leaning forward, "we need the final piece, the uncut jet footage. It's the emotional core, the part people can't deny. Right now, only Zoe's copy exists, but if we can retrieve the original from SkyShield's secure servers, it'll be undeniable." Zoe's eyes gleamed. "The backup is in the main security hub. Anthony thinks he deleted everything, but the redundancy I built means it's still there. The problem is access. It requires physical authentication inside SkyShield headquarters. I still have my old credentials," Marcus said. "They might work." Ava shook her head. Too dangerous. They're watching you. Which is why I won't go alone. Marcus replied. His tone left no room for argument. The room fell into silence. They all knew the risk, but they also knew there was no victory without it. 2 nights later, Marcus and Amara approached SkyShield headquarters just before midnight. The building glowed coldly under floodlights, its glass facade reflecting the empty streets. Using an old employee access card, Marcus led Amara inside during a shift change, when guards were least attentive. They moved through corridors Ava herself had once designed, the sterile walls now hostile. Inside the security hub, Amara kept watch while Marcus worked quickly, entering codes only a founder would know. The server hummed, resisting for a moment before unlocking. He found the folder Jet Footage, Backup Redundancy. His heart raced as he copied the files onto an encrypted drive. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hall. Voices, guards. Amara's eyes widened. We need to move now. They slipped out a side door just as 2 guards turned the corner. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. But when they stepped into the night air, clutching the drive, he allowed himself a grin. Got it, he whispered. Back at Freeman's, Ava watched the footage play across the screen. Sterling's voice filled the room, smug, venomous, dripping with racism. Every word crystal clear, every threat undeniable. Then her hand striking his face, the slap echoing like thunder. A hush fell, even though they'd all known what it would show. Seeing it, hearing it, made it real. Sophia exhaled slowly. This is the end of him. Ava's chest tightened. She remembered how her palm had stung that day, how shame had crept in with the satisfaction. But now, seeing it again, she understood that slap wasn't the beginning of her downfall. It was the beginning of his. Tomorrow, Ava said, her voice steady. We launch. The plan moved into motion at dawn. Sophia's exposé went live across multiple outlets simultaneously, packed with documents Diane had provided, Zoe's digital evidence, and survivor accounts from founders who had finally broken their silence. The footage was uploaded to multiple platforms. Time to go public at once. Within minutes, it was trending worldwide. Hashtags exploded #slap, the truth. #Sterling exposed. #I stand with Ava. News anchors scrambled. Networks breaking into scheduled programming. The footage played again and again, Sterling calling Ava a girl from the ghetto, mocking her achievements, bragging about destroying minority founders. Then the slap, the moment that reverberated far beyond that private jet. By noon, Sterling Global stock had dropped 12%. By 3, it was down 20%. Analysts called it the beginning of a corporate freefall. But the backlash was more than financial. Former employees, emboldened by the revelations, flooded social media with their own stories. A Latina founder Sterling had crushed 5 years earlier described the exact same tactics Ava had endured. A black engineer detailed how Sterling had ordered him sidelined from major projects. The pattern was undeniable. Regulators announced preliminary investigations. Politicians issued statements condemning Sterling. Civil rights leaders demanded accountability. For the first time, Ava wasn't on the defensive. Sterling was, but victory came with shadows. That evening, as Ava returned to her mother's apartment, a black SUV idled near the curb. 2 men inside watched silently as she walked to the door. "They're watching me," she whispered to Marcus on the phone. "Of course they are," he replied grimly. "That means we're hurting him. Inside." Her mother clasped her hands. "You're making enemies, baby." Ava kissed her mother's forehead. I've always had enemies, but now I'm making them afraid." That night, as Ava sat with Marcus, Freeman, Zoe, Amara, Sophia, and Diane, she looked around the room and felt a strange calm. She had been stripped of her power, dragged through humiliation, nearly broken, and yet, in this moment, she was stronger than she had ever been. Sterling had underestimated her. He had underestimated all of them, and now his empire trembled. The morning of the acquisition announcement dawned gray and tense. Ava stood in front of the mirror in Freeman's guest room, buttoning the jacket of a sharp navy suit. For weeks she had hidden in hoodies and baseball caps, blending into shadows. Today, she walked into the light. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her makeup understated, her jewelry simple. Every detail spoke of control, professionalism, and defiance. She touched the lapel once, steadying herself. No disguise, no fear. "This isn't just about me," she whispered. "This is for everyone he's ever broken." Downstairs, Marcus, Zoe, Amara, Sophia, and Freeman were waiting. Diane, too, pale but resolute. They looked at her with quiet pride. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Ava gave a small smile. "I've been ready since the slap." Together. They walked into the morning drizzle. Cameras weren't waiting for her this time. The world thought she was finished. That illusion wouldn't last long. Blackwood Tower rebranded Sterling Global HQ rose ahead of them, steel and glass gleaming like a monument to arrogance. Inside, executives, journalists, and cameras gathered to witness Sterling's triumph, the formal acquisition of SkyShield. The security guards at the entrance stiffened when Ava approached. One reached for his radio, uncertain. "Please inform Mr. Sterling that Ava Johnson is here," she said calmly. "He'll want to see me." After hurried whispers and nervous glances, they let her through. To deny her entry would raise more questions than Sterling wanted. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. The group crowded together in tense anticipation. Zoe clutched her laptop. Sophia had her recorder ready. Amara held a folder thick with filings. "Whatever happens in that room," Freeman said softly, "remember you have already won. He just doesn't know it yet." The doors opened into the penthouse conference hall. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the Portland skyline. Rows of chairs faced a stage, where a podium stood ready. Reporters mingled, their conversations hushed as they spotted Ava. It was like time froze. Coffee cups stopped midair. Eyes widened. Fingers scrambled for phones. Ava walked forward steadily, her allies flanking her like an honor guard. At the front, Anthony Parker's face drained of color. "Miss Johnson," he stammered, "this is a private event. You weren't invited." "I invited myself," Ava replied, her voice carrying across the room. "Seeing as you're selling my company today, I thought I should attend." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters shifted, sensing the real story was unfolding before them. "There's nothing to discuss," Anthony said sharply. "The board approved the acquisition. The documents are signed." "Interesting," Ava said, tilting her head. "I'd love to see those documents, especially since a federal court just issued an injunction halting any sale of SkyShield pending investigation into corporate espionage and racial discrimination." She held up her phone, displaying the judicial order Amara had filed and won only hours earlier. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Executives whispered in alarm. "That's absurd." Anthony sputtered. "Completely fabricated." "About fabrication," Ava cut in, nodding to Zoe. "Let's clear up what really happened." Zoe plugged her laptop into the presentation system. The screens around the room lit up. playing the uncut jet footage. Sterling's voice filled the hall, mocking Ava, calling her a girl from the ghetto, sneering at her achievements, threatening to steal SkyShield. Then came the slap, loud and sharp, followed by Sterling's sinister promise of ruin. Silence blanketed the room. 3 seconds stretched like eternity. Then chaos. Reporters surged forward, typing furiously, cameras flashing. Executives exchanged panicked looks. Some shook their heads in disbelief. "That's fake," Anthony shouted desperately. "Doctored federal forensics have authenticated it," Amara said coolly. "And we have more." The next slide appeared emails between Anthony and Sterling, conspiring to sabotage Ava. Payment records funneled through offshore accounts. Internal memos from Diane showing Sterling's systemic targeting of minority-led businesses. Reporters gasped audibly. Phones buzzed as editors demanded updates. "Where is Sterling?" Ava asked, scanning the room. Surprising he'd miss his big moment. As if summoned, the elevator doors opened. Richard Sterling strode in, flanked by attorneys. His tailored suit was immaculate, his smile thin, but there was a tension in his eyes. "What is this circus?" he demanded. "Truth and consequences," Ava replied. He turned to the security chief. "Why are they still here? Remove them immediately." The guard hesitated, glancing at the damning footage still looping on the screens. "Sir, given what's being presented—" "I don't pay you to think," Sterling snapped. But Ava stepped forward, closing the space between them. Camera zoomed in. The room held its breath. "You told me I'd regret slapping you," she said quietly, every word deliberate. "But the only regret here is yours. You underestimated me. You underestimated all of us. You thought my race, my gender, my background made me easy prey. You've been doing it for years, destroying lives, crushing dreams. But today, Richard, the world sees you for what you are." Journalists leaned closer, recording every syllable. Sterling sneered, "Your delusions don't interest me. This publicity stunt changes nothing." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time, his mask cracked. Panic flickered. Ava smiled faintly. "Bad news from your board?" she asked softly. "Or maybe from the market, your stock's down 17%. Since this morning." Reporters erupted again, shouting over each other. Sterling barked orders at his attorneys, but the noise drowned him out. Then the conference room doors opened, and a woman in a dark suit strode in, flanked by federal agents. She held up a badge. "Richard Sterling," she said clearly. "I'm Special Agent Diana Chen with the FBI. We have warrants to search these premises and question you regarding allegations of corporate espionage, racketeering, and discrimination in business practices." The cameras swiveled to capture Sterling's face as the agents closed in. "This is outrageous," he thundered. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Agent Chen said coolly, "and that's why we're here." As Sterling was led away, Anthony tried to slip toward a side exit. 2 agents intercepted him. His face crumpled, his carefully groomed composure collapsing. Reporters surged toward Ava. Questions flew. "Miss Johnson, how did you get this evidence? Did Sterling really target other minority founders? What happens to SkyShield now?" Ava raised her hand, commanding silence. Her voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. "What you saw today is not just about me. It's about a system that has crushed minority entrepreneurs for decades. Sterling thought my identity made me weak, but it made me strong. Strong enough to fight back. Strong enough to stand for every founder he's silenced. To those who have been broken by men like him, your stories matter. Your work matters. And justice is still possible." Applause broke out not from her team, but from journalists, staffers, even a few executives who had once doubted her. The sound swelled, rolling through the room like a tide. For the first time since that slap on her jet, Ava felt the world shift back toward her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was winning. When the conference ended, Ava and her team walked out together into the drizzle. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and hashtags trended by the minute. But Ava hardly noticed. She looked up at the gleaming tower Sterling had built on the backs of those he destroyed, and she knew his empire was falling. The world moved fast after the showdown. Within hours of Sterling's arrest, news outlets across the country carried the footage of the jet confrontation and the subsequent takedown at Sterling Global headquarters. Cable networks looped the slap again and again, but this time it wasn't framed as a disgrace. It was reframed as a spark. For weeks, Ava's name had been synonymous with scandal. Overnight, it became synonymous with defiance and resilience. Hashisstand, with Ava surged to the top of social media. Civil rights leaders invoked her name at rallies. Editorials described her as the woman who slapped a billionaire and shook the system. But while the public cheered, Ava herself felt the weight of unfinished battles. The day after Sterling's arrest, Horizon's board fractured, embarrassed, and leaderless without Anthony met in emergency session. For the first time since her removal, Ava walked back into the company auditorium. Hundreds of employees filled the seats, some who had stood with her, others who had turned their backs, and many who simply hadn't known what to believe. She stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, and looked out over the sea of faces. Silence hung in the air. "Thank you for being here," she began. "I know the last few weeks have been hard for all of us. You've read headlines, seen lies, watched our company drag through chaos. Some of you doubted me. Some of you supported me quietly. Some of you walked away. I understand all of it." Her voice softened. "But today, we start again." She explained the board's decision. She was reinstated as CEO effective immediately. Applause rippled, hesitant at first, then swelling to a standing ovation. Marcus, seated in the front row, clapped hardest of all, his grin wide. Even those who had wavered rose to their feet, swept by the tide of relief and vindication. "But this isn't about me," Ava continued, her tone firm. SkyShield was targeted because of who founded it, because a black woman dared to innovate in a field men like Sterling thought belonged to them. He thought my identity was a weakness. He was wrong. It's our strength. She paused, meeting the eyes of her team, her employees, her allies. "We're not just going to rebuild SkyShield. We're going to lead a movement. No founder, no entrepreneur should ever face what we've faced. Not again. Not ever." The cheers that followed shook the walls. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Sterling Global's stock collapsed as regulators froze assets and investigators unearthed decades of predatory acquisitions. Sterling himself, stripped of his usual insulation, faced a 37-count federal indictment: wire fraud, racketeering, discrimination, conspiracy. Anthony Parker, too, was charged, his polished corporate mask replaced by mugshots that splashed across headlines. Meanwhile, SkyShield rebounded. Clients who had cut ties returned with apologies. Investors who had abandoned ship begged to buy back in. The stock price, once gutted, surged upward again. But Ava knew this wasn't just about money. It was about legacy. 6 months later, she sat before a congressional committee, cameras flashing as she adjusted the microphone. "Miss Johnson," the chairwoman said, "your written testimony describes patterns of systemic discrimination in the technology sector. Could you elaborate for 3 hours? Ava outlined how Sterling and others like him had exploited bias as a weapon. She detailed the statistics Zoe had compiled, the cases Diane had revealed, the lives destroyed. She didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for dozens of founders who had been silenced before her. Across town that same day, Richard Sterling sat grim-faced as prosecutors presented their evidence to a grand jury. The man who had once ruled with unchecked power now faced the real possibility of decades in prison. That evening, Ava returned to her hotel room exhausted but hopeful. She called her mother, who answered with a warm smile. "Baby, you look tired." Ava laughed softly. "I am, but it's the good kind of tired, the kind that means something." "I'm proud of you," her mother said, "not just because you fought back, but because you made it bigger than you. You turned your fight into everyone's fight." Ava's eyes misted. She thought back to the little girl in South Chicago, watching her mother work 3 jobs, telling her education was her way out. She had never imagined that someday her fight would help light a way for others. 1 year after the slap, Ava stood on a stage at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The room was packed with entrepreneurs, investors, journalists, and community leaders. Behind her, a screen displayed the logo of a new initiative, the Equity and Innovation Coalition. "Today," Ava said, "we launch a $50 million fund to support minority entrepreneurs. Legal aid, financial support, mentorship. Too many have been silenced. Too many innovations stolen. That ends now." Applause thundered. Around her stood dozens of other founders, some who had been Sterling's victims, now united in purpose. She raised her right hand, the same one that had struck Sterling in the face. A year ago, this hand delivered a slap. Today, it delivers a promise that no one will have to fight alone again. The crowd rose to its feet, the ovation echoing like a roar. Later, in her office, Ava placed a framed document on the shelf Sterling's guilty plea. He had accepted a deal 7 years in prison, hundreds of millions forfeited to a victim compensation fund. It wasn't enough to undo the harm he'd caused, but it was accountability. On her desk sat a wooden plaque her mother had given her, carved with Maya Angelou's words, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated." Ava touched it lightly, feeling the truth resonate. Her journey had begun with humiliation, with loss, with a moment of rage on a private jet. Sterling had believed it would be her undoing. Instead, it became her beginning. She had rebuilt not just a company, but a movement. She had turned her pain into power, her isolation into coalition, her slap into a symbol that outlived the man who provoked it. Ava Johnson would forever be remembered not as the woman who lost everything, but as the woman who refused to stay silent, the woman who proved that courage could reshape the future. And as the sun set over the city skyline, she smiled. Her fight had become everyone's fight, and it was only the beginning. And so, what began as a single act of defiance on a private jet became something far greater. Ava Johnson's slap was never just about anger. It was about dignity, about refusing to let a powerful man strip her of her life's work because of her race, her gender, or his arrogance. She paid the price. She was humiliated, betrayed, dragged through lies and chaos. But in the end, she turned that moment of rage into a movement for justice. She exposed the truth, reclaimed her company, and lit a path for others who had been silenced for too long. Her story reminds us that discrimination isn't just in whispered insults or boardroom microaggressions. It's in systems designed to break people before they can rise. And it reminds us, too, that courage always comes at a cost. But sometimes, that cost creates change that outlives us all. So, the next time you witness injustice, ask yourself, will you stay silent? Or will you stand up even if the world tries to tear you down? If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that reveal the fight for justice in unexpected places.